ACCA, Developing Professional Accountants.
The next area of marginal costing that we need to look at is what's known as a limiting factor decision. Now you can see here, it basically is where you do not have enough resources in order to do something. In this paper, we need to consider what external factors might perhaps have influenced that. So again, the numbers ought to be relatively straightforward. They might well be given to us. What we have to do is to interpret the results. So we have got an example. Two products are passed through a particular process, and there is going to be a limited amount of time available. We've got two products. In this case, they're called Able and Baker. Here are our details of Able and Baker. Able basically has a contribution of $4 per unit. Baker basically has a contribution of $7.50 per unit. So, on initial guess, it looks as though Baker is better because it generates more contribution per unit. Now, normally, that would be correct, but it's a limiting factor question. So we now need to know how much of the limiting factor, whatever that is, how much of this limiting factor does it actually use up? So we can now see that Able only uses 1 hour of the limiting factor, whereas Baker uses 3 hours of the limiting factor. So although Baker is better in that you get more contribution per unit, it takes longer of a resource that we don't have much of. Now the method then that we simply do is we simply take the contribution and divide it by how many units of the limiting factor it uses up, which in this case is hours. So for each of these products, we are simply going to do the contribution per hour, because that's the thing, the hours is the thing we've got in short supply, the limiting factor. So obviously, Able comes out at $4 per hour, Baker comes out at $2.50 per hour. So in other words, Able is a better use of our scarce resource, so we should make Ables. So Able is ranked number 1, Baker is ranked number 2. So we are told that there is a maximum of 50,000 hours that are available. What's the maximum contribution they can earn in a month? They should manufacture 50,000 Ables. Able is better than Baker. Make as many Ables as you possibly can. They take an hour each. We've got 50,000 hours available, so make 50,000 Ables. And if you remember, contribution per unit was $4, so we will be able to make $200,000 altogether. Now, so far, hopefully not particularly difficult, but now we start getting a bit of external analysis coming back in. For whatever reason, there is a limit to the amount of Ables we are able to sell. Actions of competitors, substitutes, pricing, whatever it is, we can only now make and sell 20,000 Ables. So, we have got 50,000 hours available to begin with. What do we do with them? Is we make 20,000 Ables. Able is better than Baker. Make as many as you can. I'd like to make 50,000, but I can't. I can only make 20,000. Well, I suppose I could make more, but it would be pointless because I can't sell them. So I might as well only make 20,000 because that's all I can sell. So that uses up 20,000 hours. 20,000, and they're 1 hour each. So we will now have 30,000 hours remaining. We started with 50, we've used up 20, we've got 30 left. What do we do with that? we make 10,000 bakers. And that uses up the remaining 30,000 hours. So what's the contribution that we're going to make? Remember, able is $4 per unit. Baker is $7.50 each, and we're making 10,000 of them, 75,000. So that's $155,000. Notice that's not as good as making 50,000 ables. But we can't make 50,000 ables because we can't sell them. What assumptions has the company made? Well, first of all, there is no other alternative. So by that I mean that there is no alternative to doing the spraying themselves. Remember, it's the spraying that is causing them the problem. That's the limiting factor. What could they do? Could they outsource it? Could they get somebody else to do it instead? Could they somehow buy more? Maybe it's because they don't have enough workers. Get some more workers and train them. Maybe it's because the factory isn't big enough. Get a bigger factory. Now, obviously, if they get a bigger factory, they get more workers, that will be a cost. But they should put that against the amount of money that they are losing because they can't make and sell everything they want to. So what assumptions are they making? They are assuming they cannot change the limiting factor. Well, maybe they can. Maybe they get it from somewhere else. From a strategic perspective, what should the company do? Well, if we are purely looking at what we want to do, remember in part A, we said we were going to make 50,000 ables because that's what maximises our contribution. But that ignores what the customer wants. Now, if you have, for example, powerful customers who will demand, who will insist that you make at least some bakers, well, then surely you've got to do what they want rather than what maximises your own contribution. Now, this is where you get an overlap between management accounting and strategy. In management accounting, you would simply say, we're going to make 50,000 ables because that's best. Now we've got some strategy. We've got to say, we would like to make 50,000 ables, but there might be external factors, such as customers, that stop us from doing that. Now, obviously, the examiner would have to give you some more details, but it might well be that 50,000 ables will not be acceptable to the customer. You might have to do something else, which might make it even more important that you're able to get hold of some more of this limiting factor.